This is a screencast on how to order decimals and fractions up to an equivalent of 3 decimal places. So, first thing before we begin, we need to just talk about what a decimal is and what a fraction is. A decimal is any number that includes a decimal point in it. Decimal point being here. So we could have 127.374. That makes it a decimal. While a fraction is any number where numbers are written like this: 4/7, 1/2, 1/3. Those are called fractions. So we're going to begin by looking at how to order decimals first, and then we'll look at fractions. So decimals. So here in front of you I'm going to quickly write down some decimals. Now when ordering decimals, well, the 5 numbers we have here, we have 1.49, 2.671, 1.001, 1.5 and 0.999. What we're going to do now is put these in order from smallest to largest. Now our first step to do is look in the ones column down here, and you look for the smallest digit, and which in this case is 0. So this number must be the smallest. So we can write that over here. That's the smallest number out of these 5. Then, same thing again, we look. So we've got the smallest number, and you'll notice that in the ones column, 3 of them have 1. So then we go into the tenths column, and we look at these 3 numbers. We've got a 4, a 0, and a 5. Therefore, this number here must be the smallest, because it's got 1 here, and the smallest digit in the tenths column. Then we look for out of these 2, because they both have 1. This one's a 4, so it must be the smaller one. 1.5 is greater than 1.49. So it goes 1.49, 1.5, and then the last number that we haven't talked about is 2.671. So just to recap, start with the digits to the left, biggest equals biggest digit equals biggest number is the key thing to remember when doing these. Yes, let's have a quick look at fractions. Now with fractions here, I'm just going to write down a series of fractions. Now unlike decimals, you can't look to the number to the left because it's written as a top button, a top number, and this top number here is called the numerator, and the bottom number is called the denominator. The first thing to do is look at the denominator in a number. So if we scan along here, we've got a couple of 2s, a couple of thirds, or a couple of halves, a couple of thirds, and a quarter. Now the biggest denominator is where you start, and that will be the smallest one. So in this case it's the quarter, and the quarter is the smallest, and the reason it's the smallest is because if you think of a pizza that's cut into quarters, that means it's 1/4, as opposed to say 1/3. Your slice is going to be much bigger, or a half. This is much smaller than a third or a half. So we looked at that denominator first. So quarters first, from smallest. Then you can see that these 2 others have the same denominator. So then we look at the numerator, and we look at which is the smallest numerator. And in this case, it's this one here. So 1/3 is next. Then we need to look at these 2 here. and you'll notice closely 2/3 or a half. Now half is smaller than 2/3, so we put that there, and then we finish off with 2/2. So with simple fractions like this, the key thing to remember is look at the denominators first, and then you need to have to think they relate to each other. In this case here, this one's a bit tricky because there's 2/3, but here there's a half, and 2/3 is bigger than a half.